Previously on Nott's magical pub, Elias entered the SHOWOCO room. As he stepped into the vision of his office that was visible from outside the room, he had expected a room, a void, or perhaps another hallway. He found himself sitting in his office behind a massive desk of polished mahogany. The heavy oak door to his suite swung open with a violent crash. "You have got to be kidding me, Elias!" came a shout from the door. The voice belonged to the senior VP, a man whose presence usually felt like a suffocating weight. He stormed across the carpet. He slammed a leather-bound file onto the mahogany surface so hard the coffee in Elias's mug rippled. "You're the head of this department for a reason," the manager hissed, leaning over the desk until Elias could see the frantic pulse in the man's neck. "Look at this financial report. These are rookie mistakes. We both know you're better than this. If I take this to the board, we don't just lose the account, we lose our reputation. Is this how you handle your responsibilities?" All of this seemed like a déjà vu to Elias, because he had already lived this day. He remembered the cold sweat on his palms and the way he had stammered an apology. He remembered staying until 11 p.m., his eyes burning, fixing the disaster that Jack, the manager's incompetent nephew, had created. Elias had been the reliable one, the man who stayed quiet and carried the weight of others. But as he looked at his boss now, Elias felt a strange, detached calm. The memory of the SHOWOCO door was still fresh in his mind. He knew this wasn't just a memory, it was a second chance. "Actually, I'm not kidding," Elias said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the manager's rage like a blade through silk. He stood up slowly, the transition from the pub still fueling his defiance, as he still thought that all this is unreal, and he is dreaming of sorts. "First of all, you bypassed the review process and gave this directly to Jack to prove himself. If your nephew were more competent than a monkey with a calculator, he would have caught these errors at 9 this morning. But he didn't. Had you not pressurized the kid to prove himself, he would have come to me to get correction, but he did not." Elias slid the leather file back across the mahogany, a small, cold smile touching his lips. "It's 2 hours before closing. You can't expect me to fix your mistakes that you deliberately risked. And I am not overworking myself for someone else's incompetence. I am done babysitting. This report will have to wait till tomorrow." The silence that followed was absolute. The VP's face turned a deep, unhealthy purple, his mouth hanging open in a silent gasp. For the first time in 10 years, the power in that room had shifted. The VP fixed his posture because of this sudden change in behavior. "Well, I guess it can't be helped then, but I expect the corrections first thing in the morning. You get that, Elias?" said the VP in an authoritative tone. "Sure thing, boss. I think I will bring Jack to my office and make him do all the corrections in front of me. Maybe I will also pull his legs while I point out all the rookie mistakes he made," said Elias in a tone that had malicious compliance written all over it. This response really infuriated the VP. "Now listen here, Elias. That boy is my nephew who I love to bits. You better treat him right. I don't want you to put more burden on him than he can carry," said the VP in an expressly aggravated tone. "No, he is not your nephew, boss. Until 5 p.m., he is my underling, and I will work him like you worked me when you were head of the department. After 5, you can babysit him all you want. If you want proper work from me, you have to let me work properly," said Elias in a defiant tone. Hearing this response from Elias, the VP calmed down a bit. His posture also became relaxed as he said, "Just don't overdo anything, Elias. You know he is not made of the matter that guys like you and me are made of, but I still have to make this work, you know." Hearing this, Elias also shifted his tone and said, "Don't worry, boss. You will have him back in one piece after 5 p.m. Just cover for the delay, and I will have this report fixed first thing in the morning." The VP nodded at Elias as he went out of the room and closed the door behind him. As the door closed, his Elias felt a sense of bliss and started thinking to himself, "Oh, wow. So this is how it feels to talk back. This went better than I thought it would." He assumed that since he was able to do what was in his mind that he could not do, he would now return back to the pub. But that did not happen. He looked at the clock. "Maybe the illusion will end after the shift ends," he thought to himself. Elias kept doing the work that he was doing out of habit. As the clock reached 4:45, he sat down relaxed at his seat, waiting for the clock to reach 5 so he would come out of the door. But 5 p.m. came and went. The office outside grew quiet, but the mahogany desk didn't fade. The hum of the air conditioning remained steady. Maybe the exit is the building itself, he reasoned. He walked out, leaving the office he knew by heart, and stepped into the elevator. When he reached the street, the humid city air hit him. He looked up at the sky, his confidence wavering for the first time. A taxi honked nearby, but the world didn't budge. Elias began to feel a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. He began the walk toward his apartment, his mind racing through the logic of the SHOWOCO room. As he passed a high-end cocktail bar, 2 women in expensive dresses stepped out onto the sidewalk, laughing loudly. Their voices carried sharply through the evening air. "Girl, you know how it is lately," one of them said, tossing her hair. "These days the ones are trying to act like 9s. Can't they see they just don't fit?" Elias stopped dead in his tracks. His blood turned to ice. He had heard those exact words before, muttered by Matt, the crazy Sudoku-obsessed regular at Nott's magical pub. The ones acting like 9s. He spun around, his face pale. "Wait," he called out, stepping toward the women. "What did you just say? What do you mean by that?" The women stopped, their laughter dying instantly. They looked him up and down, looking at a man in an expensive suit who looked like he was having a nervous breakdown. "None of your business, creep," the first one snapped, pulling her friend away. "Get a life," the other muttered as they hurried toward a waiting car. Elias stood frozen on the sidewalk. It couldn't be a coincidence. Those were Matt's words. The panic, which had been a slow simmer, was now a boiling heat in his chest. He reached his apartment in a daze. Looking at the door of his apartment, Elias thought, maybe if I open this door, it might take me out of this simulation. Elias opened the door expecting a corridor in a pub. Instead, he was welcomed by his apartment room that was always there. Disappointment loomed over Elias as he entered his house. He went through his regular routine. He made his evening tea and took out some baked cookies that he had made a day before. He sat down on his table and enjoyed his evening tea as he usually did. That is when he thought, maybe all of this is like a dream. Maybe the SHOWOCO room lets you out once you sleep and your brain resets. Thinking this, Elias relaxed and got ready for bed. Laying on his bed, he thought, I'll wake up in the pub, he whispered into the darkness. It has to end when I sleep. When Elias opened his eyes the next morning, he expected to be standing up and looking out a door open into Nott's magical pub. Instead, he found himself laying on his bed and looking at the ceiling of his room. Realizing that he is still in his bed, the reality of his situation dawned on him, along with the sunlight seeping through the windows. Elias looked at his cell phone to check the date and realized that it is the next day. The realization that this wasn't a vision he could walk out of. He had defied his boss and promised a finished report, and now he had to deliver in a reality that refused to let him go. He scrambled out of bed, his hands shaking as he pulled on his suit. He had to get to the office. He had to play the part he had so arrogantly claimed. The morning at the office was a blur. Elias had arrived on time, his suit perfectly pressed, but his hands still trembling with the lingering adrenaline of his morning panic. He sat behind the mahogany desk and buzzed the intercom. "Jack, my office, now." When Jack entered, he looked like a condemned man. He sat across from Elias, opening his laptop with a heavy sigh. For the next 2 hours, they went through the report. Jack tried to fix the errors, his brow furrowed in concentration, but he kept stumbling over the same basic formulas. Every time Jack made an error, Elias had to step in and fix the mistake. It was like watching someone try to write poetry in a language they didn't speak. Finally, Elias leaned back, watching Jack tap a restless, rhythmic beat on the edge of the mahogany desk. "Jack," Elias said quietly, "why are you here, truly?" Jack stopped tapping. He looked down at his keyboard. "My uncle, the VP, he says this is a career. He says music is a hobby, but accounting is a life. It pays well, Elias. You know that better than anyone." "It pays well," Elias repeated, looking at the luxury of his own office. "But look at you. You're miserable. You're trying to force a melody into a spreadsheet. You know, music can be a good career if you work hard enough at it. But in here, You're just like a 1 acting like a 9 in a game of Sudoku. You don't fit the square, Jack. Jack looked up, stunned by the honesty. Elias realized then that while Jack could learn to be a good accountant if he stayed for 20 years, he would never be a happy one. And then the thought turned inward. What about me? Elias looked at his own hands. He was a master of this grid, a perfect 9 in the eyes of the board, but he was just as out of place as Jack. He was a baker living in an accountant's skin. He dismissed Jack with a nod, finished the report himself, and delivered it to the VP's desk. He didn't wait for the praise. He didn't wait for the nod of approval. I get it now, Elias thought as he walked out of the executive suite. The cryptic message. The 1s and the 9s. I've solved the riddle. That has to be it. That's the trigger to end the simulation. He was convinced that the SHOWOCO room was waiting for him. He just had to go back to the origin point. If he could re-enter the room from this side, the loop would close. He didn't take a taxi. He ran. He reached the warehouse district, his heart hammering as he turned into the narrow alley where Nott's magical pub should have been. He looked for the orange neon sign, the warm glow that promised a way out. There was nothing. The wall was solid. A windowless, soot-stained expanse of brick greeted him. Elias ran his hands over the rough surface, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Nott, I'm here. I understand now. Open the door. But there was no door, just the cold, indifferent stone of a dead-end alley. 5s in a pair don't go anywhere, a raspy voice whispered from the darkness behind him. They go out of the box. They don't fit in a square. Elias spun around, his eyes wide. Matt, is that you? He stared into the shadows, searching for the crazy man from the pub, for anyone who could explain the riddle. But the alley was empty. The wind whistled through the trash, and the distant sound of the city mocked him. He was out of the box, but the grid was still holding him fast. Elias was standing alone in an alley, looking at a brick wall where there should have been a door, but there were just stones mocking his memory.
So, what do you think would end the simulation? What would you try if you were in place of Elias? Are Matt's words some cryptic message, or just gibberish? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. I'll be reading them to decide what Elias does next. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you don't lose the way to Nott's magical pub. Thanks for listening.